You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is April 22nd, 2023, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty across the country and in your region. Today, we're actually kicking off a series of interviews that we're going to be doing with Libertarian Party nominees for the presidential nominee. And our first one today is Joshua Rodriguez. And so he is running for that. And that's for the 2024. So this is just, right around the corner coming up here. And so this is hopefully something that will be informative to all of you and give you a chance to start thinking about these guys before we, get to the deciding who shall be the Libertarian nominee. But before we get into that, let me introduce you to the rest of our panel. In our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. No Screaming Eagle of Freedom with us today. And my name's Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host. So let's jump right into it. So Joshua, you're running for the 2024 LP nomination for the U.S. president. Maybe our invisible hand, James, can you bring that his page up? So here is his page where you can go and find out more information about it. So I guess, Josh, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run for the president as a libertarian.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here. The nomination's coming up pretty fast, even though it's a little bit early for campaigning, but 2024 is just around the corner. I grew up in a family that did a lot of work with nonprofits. So as a young person, my mom was very active with domestic violence and those sorts of issues in the community. And so I remember bringing a box of food to a young family and her kid, visiting them, delivering food, those sorts of things. And so it kind of just shaped who I am today. But I think what really engaged me to run for president was the Parkland shooting in Florida. There was a call to action almost, with people saying, we need people to get involved. We need people to be active in the community. We need to get our young people like myself into politics, right? And so in 2018, I ran for mayor. In 2020, I ran for United States Senate. I've been a nonprofit operator for half a decade already. And so when COVID hit and we had all those lockdowns, people were hungry, people needed supplies. And so I participated in the Jefferson County Food Security Task Force. And so my nonprofit was able to deliver over 10,000 pounds of food to the community in a time of need. And so I've been extremely active. Jefferson County School Safety and Security Task Force, after the Parkland shooting, community emergency response team, FEMA trained, search and rescues, those sorts of things. And so I'm very active in the community. And so taking the step forward as a candidate for president just seemed like the right thing to do. And so I have the experience. I'm a scientist. My bachelor's degree was in biochemistry, graduate school in chemistry. And so daily, I'm a process engineer, chemical engineer, those sorts of things. And so I feel like I'm ready. I think we need a scientist candidate running for president. And so I think I'm the right fit.
Could you make that connection a little better? You said a scientist running for that puts you in a better position in terms of running for president, and if you do win, why would that more qualify you to be president than anybody else?
Yeah, I think in our political system right now in Congress, right, we have a lot of people that are attorneys, they're lawyers, and so their whole motivation from ever since going to college was to be a politician. And so those folks, I just seem like it's more of a career. For me, I have a passion for science and technology, especially in the age of artificial intelligence and a lot of these things that we've been doing in our communities that are lacking. So you think young people, what should our young people be doing now, and how to educate those folks in the future? I think when I was younger, people said the computer was important, right? And so my mom practically went bankrupt buying an Apple computer. And so I grew up with computers. So the generation before me said computers are absolutely important. And so now we have new technology, sensors, those sorts of things. And so what's the next generation supposed to do to handle that technology, and what's the future like? And so I don't think you're going to get that understanding with an attorney at all.
Yeah, I think we see that too with some of the terrible questions we hear Congress asking, where, and some of them, it doesn't even sound like in their hearings they know what the internet is. So it certainly, would be a positive, I guess, to get somebody up there who understands these things. The last time we had an engineer, I think, was a nuclear engineer, and that was Jimmy Carter. So, we're certainly due for somebody who has science background. It's been a while.
I hope we're not going to murder anybody's presidency after Jimmy Carter's, right? Okay.
Well, this does bring up some interesting questions, because there's a lot of kind of big topics coming up. Like you said, AI is certainly huge. Talking about, potentially eliminating a lot of, I guess, sort of low efficiency jobs, you might say, I guess. And there's also the big topic too of digital currency too, that, I mean, certainly we've seen Bitcoin on the rise, but yeah, all the governments now are talking about having a digital currency, which has massively different implications than Bitcoin. So, are these kind of the some of the topics you plan to focus on in your run?
Yeah, understanding those things, and it becomes different. If you have somebody that just doesn't understand it, obviously they're not going to make it part of their policy platform. There's just no way. No one's going to say, "Oh, I want to start running quantum computers for the government, and here's why." Artificial intelligence, we can use it this way. Here's why. Digital currency, what's good, what's bad about it. Here's why. A lot of that stuff is very complex, and even discussing it here can be a long conversation. But overall, in short, I had a local state representative introduce a policy that said a motorcycle, if it's at a red light, it can just go, and then they described like this sensor in the in the asphalt that can read the radio waves of the transmission, and that a motorcycle transmission engine is too small for the frequency to sense for the light to change, so they should just run it. There's no sensors in the asphalt sensing radio waves from transmission, and so that state representative had to pull their policy off, after their submission. And so for me, it's like, I mean, you go on Google, it could be a trap. And so if you don't understand science, you should definitely not be submitting policies in government, especially if it's becoming a law that is imposed on everyone else. And so I think science is extremely important, especially when we start talking about energy, those sorts of things.
So if we're gonna go down the road a little bit more on this whole thing about science and technology, do you see artificial intelligence as a threat to humanity, or do you see it as just another step in terms of the development of technology and innovations that have been the history of the human race? Is artificial intelligence going to change the way human beings view each other, or how, or place in terms of the hierarchy of life, if artificial intelligence is really a threat? So is it a threat, or is it something that you see as something good in terms of our development?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to have its pros and cons. We saw recently a song, right, by a ghostwriter, wrote a song using artificial intelligence of a singer called Drake, right?
Yes.
Beautiful song, went super viral, super mega viral, and then every platform censored it, shut it down, all the links, like as fast as it can go. And so, like, even I haven't been able to get a hold of that song to listen to it, just to appreciate, the beauty of that song, what it could not be. I think artificial intelligence in that sense is like a shining bright star. But for companies, though, you can't necessarily use it yet, right? I can't just put my proprietary confidential data into an artificial site and expect it not to go out to the wrong place, because they're data mining and harvesting everything that we're putting into it. And so if we're trying it out, having fun with it, right, they're collecting every ounce of that data. And so now it's just a big data harvesting, and so it's dangerous in that respect too. There's no privacy, there's no encryption associated with it yet, and so we still have to be very careful about those sorts of things.
Fair enough.
It certainly seems like there's always a danger to politicians jumping in and trying to overregulate what they don't understand too. I mean, we kind of see the same thing sort of happening with TikTok, where some Republicans were helping to lead the charge on banning TikTok, and it was actually guys like Rand Paul who were stepping up and at least putting the brakes on it to say, hey, we're not going to fast track this. We need to discuss it more. But you could certainly see the danger of that too with AI, where you could just get a lot of politicians who kind of scare themselves into putting all kinds of clamps on it, I guess. Does that concern you at all, the possibility that we might overregulate it to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, as president, as a future president of the United States, right? I want to open up borders. I want to have great relationships with other countries. I want to unite the world around us and end war, right? That's a libertarian value. That's when you hire someone like myself to do that, that's what you're going to get. And so when you're saying that TikTok's associated with China and demonizing that, that's just going to be a bad thing. Even though people might disagree, we have to somehow find ways to connect in a positive way. And so one of my missions, the slogans I'm always going to say in these types of talks is, I want to end war, cure cancer. And so if we're ending war, right, and then now we can unite the whole world to actually focus on things that matter, like curing cancer. Iran, loved ones are dying of cancer. Russia, North Korea, China. A lot of people are suffering from diseases like cancer, and why not focus on something that could be positive? I don't see how. We did it with the International Space Station before, collab and stuff like that. But as we get into these wars, as we start these conflicts, we get further and deeper into these Cold War tactics. This is just another example of a fight over data. If we can somehow encrypt, technology in a way where something like TikTok, we can do things and your data privacy is secure, right? And there's ways to do that as an individual person to protect your identity and not share certain things. But it has to be a common practice. Even when you think of like billion-dollar companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, their intentions are to get access to your data, how it's used, what your age is, what's your geolocation, what's your interests, sharing specific data. We know that Facebook lost half its profitability when Apple updated its software programming just by saying, hey, this app wants to track your data. Do you want to share it? And you're like, no. That impacted Facebook greatly. There's ways to protect yourself now without regulation, but we're definitely not educating the community about those sorts of things. And so yes and no, we do need to worry about data privacy, but at the same time, we need that liberty, right? That freedom.
Well, speaking of liberty, go ahead, Leon. What was it?
Joshua, you just said as president, you want to open borders, I guess, more open than they are, I would imagine. But right now we have a real crisis on our southern border where the border is open and people are streaming across the border. I mean, are you talking about something like that, or you have something else in mind when you talk about an open border?
I'm specifically talking at the federal level, trade, but I think with our state, in that sort of conversation, the Constitution gives states the absolute right to govern their borders, who they are, their identity, and those individual community members voted for those elected officials. And so my intention is to support each and individual state in a libertarian way. And so if that state governor calls me up and says, hey, Joshua, Mr. President, I need this X, Y, Z, I'm going to support them in a libertarian fashion to make sure that what those voters wanted, they get. And so, but overall, I think we should start up trade in a big way. And that's just going to help out businesses too. Free trade is something that carries libertarian value, and I strongly agree with it, and it's absolutely important.
Okay.
Joshua, one of the things I was curious about too with, the path to liberty that everybody takes is kind of different. And it'd be kind of interesting to hear sort of what your path was. I know for a lot of us, it certainly didn't happen in the public K through 12 government monopolized schools. A lot of times, that sort of sets everybody on the path toward, voting for more government. But what was it that rung your liberty bell?
I've been very involved in education ever since I was younger. I've always been homeschooled, those sorts of things. But going through college, being a part of the student council, those sorts of things, it kind of educated me in a different way. But recently, though, when you think of education, there's a lot of issues. The school, the prison pipeline, that exists. And so I was part of a county task force. And so part of that was colorblind survivors, mental health professionals, principals, law enforcement, educators. So I got to understand fully what's going on within the schools. And so you hear things like, well, I'm not getting this particular thing done, so let's call the cops and commingle criminal records with school records. And then when those children try to leave to another school, we send those records to those schools because that's transparency. And I'm thinking to myself, education is supposed to be a pure, loving environment. You wouldn't send your kids to a daycare that you pay for, being abused and ultimately locked up. But that's a false liberty that needs to change. And so those sorts of things I understand completely. I've done the community involvement, but I would change it in a big way. And so my motivations, and my absolute political experience is highly in depth. And so a lot of community involvement, I understand a lot of topics, even when the Black Lives Movement in 2020, when Denver was protesting for 11 days, I was there every single day. That's second to the protests in Portland. And it was chaos, but you're down there speaking to folks intensely. But you're speaking to even special interest groups and those members. You're getting involved at one of the highest levels. And so my interest running for president, my ideas about the liberty, it's pretty strong. I'm pretty passionate about it, obviously.
Well, I guess what are I guess the best ways you would communicate a value for liberty if you were elected president?
Yeah, that's a great question. My answer to that, I'm a great listener, and that's my motivation. When you look at organizations like March for Your Lives, even though we're going to be bumping heads, right? I'm pro Second Amendment, those sorts of things, and even participating in the Jefferson County School Safety and Security Task Force. Trying to understand the issue. I strongly relate, not to the organization. I dislike or just don't like the organization at all. It's a special interest group. But the people, the members, they lost loved ones. Those are the ones that are suffering now, but they're also the ones that have the information. And so if we don't listen, if we don't go out to those folks and actually listen, cross the aisle, that's why you hire an independent candidate, a libertarian, because we can cross both aisles. Because in the end, we don't want school shootings in our communities anymore. And so it's my passion to listen. And so as I'm advocating liberty, that's a definition. Hiring a libertarian, hiring somebody that's an independent candidate. We can't continue any longer with these Democrats and Republicans because all they do is fight. And so if we're trying to really get liberty, I think it starts with listening, because tell you the truth, no one's listening anymore. It's more about politicians talking. And so less talking, more doing. And so millennials are very volunteer driven. That's my spirit. And it's about moving forward in a new vision, but as quickly as possible, really.
It does worry me though, because when I listen to a lot of the people out there, they want big government solutions on both sides. And I mean, it's like, how do we reach them to say, hey, that might not be the best way?
It's true, yeah.
Well,
Joshua, what you think? Well, I'm sorry. Maybe you wanted to say something about Jason's comment. Go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to jump in with the next question, Leon, but if you want to, if anybody wants to go on.
I thought you had a question at the end of your statement. Joshua, so at the bottom line, what do you think will distinguish you from other candidates, especially from the Republican and the Democrat makeup? What distinguishes you? What will make you different? What will tell the voter that this is a man of principles, or who will deliver the things that he promises?
Yeah, I think about honesty, right? A lot of politicians are going to come up with the gimmicky kind of talk and the blanket statements. I've been educating myself for this opportunity, and so I come with experience, right, and leadership, and so a lot of those things are necessary. But as a millennial candidate, and also too, for the record, I'm one of the only members of color to ever run in the Libertarian Party for president, and so that's a big deal for me as well. But I'm also a scientist. I go back to that initial conversation. It's so important to understand what our future looks like, because things are changing. And so when I say Cold War, I mean countries are hacking us right now. Technology is being stolen. We have to deal with nuclear weapons in North Korea, and now South Korea is saying, the United States doesn't want to help us. We need nuclear weapons. As a libertarian, my intention is to end our nuclear capabilities, end the possibility of nuclear war ever happening. And so when I say open up borders and shaking hands, I absolutely mean that. It's not naive to say world peace and actually mean it. And so I really want that. And so and I hope the Libertarian Party agrees with me too in next year in May when we do the nominations, right? Because I'm just speaking the truth. I'm speaking from experience and honesty. And so I hope my values match the libertarian viewpoints as much as possible. They may or might not. I may be more Republican and a little bit more Democrat on the other side. But that's the reason why I can't run as a Republican or Democrat, because I am truly a libertarian. And so I have those strong values, but from both aisles. I think even Democrats say they have guns at home, even though they're trying to fight restrictions. And Republicans, they want clean water, they want clean air to breathe. They want those things, but they don't want to invest in it. But it just depends. I think the future is a candidate like myself who's scientific minded. I think it's absolutely important.
Yeah. Well, certainly, you being a guy who can find the commonality to reach across, that's certainly got to be a big solution to some of these problems. But you mentioned some of the threats from the outside, like North Korea and some of these other things. But it seems to me that with the almost $32 trillion debt, a lot of the threat to our future is coming from within, just in the growth of government. And what things would be a priority for you to roll back if you could, as president?
Yeah. I think one of the things is we do stop investing in our military the way we have. And so, I'm absolutely, once I get the nomination as president, I don't mind taking the travel to places like Iran or Russia or China and actually coming up with peace agreements now, not even as president, just having the opportunity to sit down with those folks and take those chances and do it. I'm going to absolutely do it. And so if we can roll back the $1.5 trillion annually that we spend on the military, that's a savings in everyone's pocket in regards to the IRS. And so at some point, just as my process engineering mind goes, we're going to start streamlining things heavily. I'm a libertarian, so a lot of those things are going to change. You're going to be getting a refund on your IRS from the IRS, because we're spending absolutely less money. And at some point, we may just the IRS completely. And so if you just think of those sorts of things, That's a lot of change that can happen within the first 100 days. Absolutely. And so I think just initially, that's my motivation. Within the 100 days of my presidency, I want to cure things like AIDS. I think I can do that. And then focus worldwide on solutions to cure cancer. And so we're not going to be spending $1.5 trillion ever again on the military. And so we're going to be focusing at home. We're going to be focusing on peace. And we're going to be focusing on our businesses and opening up trade to the communities and to the world around us. And it's going to be a huge effect, trickle effect. I think China is going to respond positively, right? Because now we're positioning ourselves in a positive way, and we're going to support places like South Korea, right? Like we said we should, and then we're going to broker peace between Ukraine and Russia, and then we're going to mend our issues that we have with Iran, and so we're going to just stop the tit for tat, back and forth, Cold War nonsense once and for all, fix our past and our history, apologize where apologies need to be made, and move on. We don't need to keep moving forward with threats and this idea that our communities are never going to be safe because we're going to get bombed by nuclear weapons from another country. That should never, ever happen. And I think we should work towards fixing it.
Well, we're starting to get close to the end of the time, and those certainly sound like a lot of big and great aspirations. But I guess as far as running for the office, what can the Libertarian Party do to help you in your run for office? What is it that you think they might be able to do to help or do better so that we can get a Libertarian in there? And what are some of your final thoughts that you'd like to leave the audience with as well?
Yes. Real quick, I think as a community, we need to all come together and unite. And so, that's my main passion and motivation. When communities are locked up and elections are overrun by either Republicans or Democrats, you think New York, right? They're heavily Democrats. Republican candidates can run. And now the Democrats can pick and choose their community members who they want to run in elections. And so a lot of people get shunned or pushed out. And so the main thing is, when they go independent and move to the Libertarian Party, we really need to unite with each other and really focus as a big family. We're going to fight and bicker and have those issues and a little bit of a conflict. But at the end of the day, holiday season, election time comes, and we really need to come together and unite. I see that vision. And I think that electing someone like me is a very positive thing that can really help unite the Libertarian Party.
Well, thanks so much, Joshua, for joining us today. And we're going to actually have another show with Joshua where we dive deeper into the specific issues. This show, we wanted to just give you an overview of who Joshua was and his run for presidency. So look for that show. And until then, stay tuned and stay free.
Yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.